Oglądacie podcast Kosmopolacy. To rozmowy bez spiny, bez cenzury, na totalnym luzie. W imieniu autora proszę o subskrypcję kanału oraz jego ocenę.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Kosmopolacy podcast. Today I have a pleasure hosting Tony Housh, Chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. Tony Housh is a strategic policy, business and communications advisor with 30 years of experience in Poland and Central and Eastern Europe. He has advised and assisted companies in a wide range of sectors, including defense, energy, innovative technologies and biosciences. He has served as the Chairman of AmCham since January 2015. He is a frequent commentator on radio and television, a keynote speaker, and has published numerous articles on trade, investment, innovation, and security in a wide range of publications. During today's interview, we'll find out, among other topics, what is American Chamber of Commerce responsible for in Poland, which American companies, in addition to the ones already present here, are eyeing Warsaw and Poland as their next target, what does it take for Polish companies to conquer American markets. We will touch upon defense, politics, and business in general. Hello, Tony. Welcome to Kosmopolacy podcast, and thank you for accepting my invitation to speak with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Even though you're not Polish, I can still call you a Cosmopolak since you have lived in this country for an extended period of time. An American citizen, cosmopolitan, living in Poland, having a great time here. You have been serving as the chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce since January 2015. Was this the year you have arrived in Poland? How did it happen that you landed such a prestigious position in Warsaw?
Well, my time in Poland predates that quite a while. I first moved to Poland in 1993, so I've been here quite a while, and I've been associated with the AmCham since the mid-90s, first as its executive director and government affairs leader, and then I've been on the board since the early 2000s. And before that, I was spent a lot of time in this part of the world before the transition, still during the Cold War, to those countries which, now are just historical names like the German Democratic Republic, Czechoslovakia, PRL, Soviet Union. So a lot of change since then.
Yeah, definitely. And as we chat a little bit before we started recording, you mentioned that Warsaw changed throughout the years tremendously.
Absolutely. I frequently tell people, and particularly also talking to young Polish colleagues, that, I've lived in 5 or 6 different Warsaws over the years. So, the pace of change, entire new neighborhoods. So, this part of town where we're sitting in tonight, a completely different place than it was 10 years ago. So that change has been dramatic, but it's also been part of the excitement and part of the pleasure of working here, seeing this rapid change and literally saying, hey, whole new city every 5 years, it seems.
Yeah, definitely. For all of those that are not familiar with the American Chamber of Commerce, can you give a little summary of what AmCham is responsible for here in Poland?
Yeah, well, AmCham is a private sector organization. It's entirely privately funded, has no government money, and it's really to serve as a kind of community voice for U.S. investors to work on the investment environment and also be kind of a collective voice for sectors as well as the body of investors. AmCham is about 350 U.S. companies, and we're rather unique among the international business organizations in that we're not a bilateral chamber. We're only U.S. companies. But it has a big footprint. Our investors account for about 5% of the GDP and around 5% of the workforce in Poland. So it has a significant economic footprint. And so we try to talk to various stakeholders, both in the government, opposition, other business groups, as well as our partners in the EU, to try to figure out how we can continue to grow the economy and make sure that investments continue to flow into Poland.
Great. We already see a lot of businesses here. Do you believe that there will be more? What other companies in general, in addition to the existing ones, are eyeing Warsaw and Poland as their next target?
Well, I can tell you that there's a number of investments we'll expect to see coming certainly in 2024 and beyond. But one of the things I think that's always important to remind people that with the U.S. investment here, about 50% or more of the investment each year is from the existing investors. And so sometimes that doesn't always get as big of headlines as they continue to grow and expand and grow headcount, put new capabilities into the country. Of course, the big new projects get most of the headlines, and that's great. But half that investment just coming from those people who've been here in some cases for decades. This last year we saw the major announcements by Intel for the chip assembly and testing facility. Visa opened up a new global data center. PepsiCo opened up one of their largest and most environmentally friendly facilities in the world, and we'll, I think, continue to see some strong investment. And some of the investment that is ongoing, again, doesn't just happen in a single shot. Building the cloud with companies like Microsoft and Google, these are multi-year projects. So sometimes the headline takes place in 2021, 2022, but the investment continues on those projects for years and years. But I think the outlook is quite good for continued U.S. investment into Poland.
Great, I'm happy to hear that. As we know, American banks are present in Warsaw. JP Morgan, which I have a pleasure to work for the past several years, to be more precise, 18 years. Jesus, it feels like yesterday when I was getting my first position there. Goldman Sachs, Citibank's already here. Is Merrill still exercising the idea to open its offices here? I used to work for Merrill from 2000 till 2003, but I was not aware. And just up until recently, I found out that the son of Merrill Lynch's founder, Charles Merrill Jr., used to live and died here in Poland.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I remember that little piece of information. I think he passed away somewhere in the south, but he was quite interested and wrote a great deal about Central Europe, about Ukraine, about the experience here in Poland. With regard to financial institutions, I think we'll continue to see growth overall in the sector. Now, whether that will be entities actually doing banking per se, but I think, as you know, a lot of the financial services activity here is in the middle bank, office, analytics, global support. So I think we'll continue to see more investment there, both among the existing companies, but I think more to come. Now, whether or not Merrill, which I believe is now part of Bank of America,
Correct.
whether they will do anything physically here. They certainly haven't told me about that yet. We'd love to see them do something here, but I think overall in the sector we'll continue to see growth.
Great. They used to have presence in Poland back in the day, if I remember correctly, if I read it correctly in the news.
They did, but that's going back into the mists of time. But I do remember Merrill being here. Of course, that was also a time when Bank of America had a branch office here, everything. But I think now, as many things, particularly in the single market, that you don't necessarily need to be physical in every location in order to do business throughout the single market on the banking passport. So, we'll see. I'm hopeful though that we'll continue to see growth. Among you mentioned a number of companies, but also there's State Street, Bank of New York Mellon, and a number of others that have significant operations here in Poland.
It's great. It's great to be a part of this this time when we see a lot of American investment, American banks opening their offices here and creating jobs for Poland, and not only Poland citizens, because people come here to find jobs from Spain, from Portugal, from India, from a number of places.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things too. I think that with the attractiveness of the quality of life, not just in Warsaw but throughout Poland and a lot of the cities, it makes it easier. Now once people visit to say, hey, I can have a good quality of life here in a great city, working for an international company, and I don't have to be tied to that, whether it's Bank X in Spain or Portugal or Greece or Italy, because those languages are also needed to support the global 24/7 operations that a lot of the banks are providing out of Poland.
Correct. We do look for people with language skills, with different languages, not only English and Polish, for our, for example, KYC, Know Your Customer department. Yep. So that's really useful. A while ago, the news all over the country were buzzing about the shale gas in Poland and about American companies that would work on its extraction, giving Poland energy independence and financial well-being. Some even joke that Poland was destined to be the next Dubai or Saudi Arabia. Is this project gone and forgotten forever? Will companies like Chevron or ConocoPhillips no longer pursue this subject?
Well, I think there was a lot of time, effort, and money put into the shale gas exploration here throughout a range of concessions around the country, and I think ultimately just turned out to not be economically viable. A lot of that had to do with the geology being different than, say, the Permian Basin in the U.S., where the sometimes controversial fracking, though, could be done and cover a much broader area and release recoverable gas flows. The geography in Poland, and I think also some of the depth in Poland, made that just not viable. So it's not that there's not gas, but getting that out at a price that the market will pay for is not, I think, not something that's going to be on the table perhaps in the near future. However, but I do think that helped lay the groundwork for that need to understand the energy security, energy diversification. And I think part of that effort on shale also led to the creation of a significant import market in LNG, coming not only from the States but from other places, from Qatar and other. And now with the movement forward on civilian nuclear is very important. Plus, I think we'll see tremendous investment continuing in both wind and solar with the renewables. So I think that while the shale gas project may not have had the effect everyone hoped it had, I think it did help open the door strategically to a lot of other transformation and prepared Poland better for this rapid shift away from the Russian gas. So I think that the most important thing I think in business is that we learn. Even if something doesn't work out, we learn from it and are better positioned than to take advantage of the next opportunity.
Yeah, we definitely take conclusions from the research and learn lessons. You have mentioned movement forward for civilian nuclear energy. Recently, there has been an agreement signed between Westinghouse Electric Company and Bechtel, two American global leaders in nuclear energy, and the Polish government, correct?
Correct, indeed. So the Westinghouse Bechtel Consortium is moving forward with the first civilian large-scale baseline power load stations. And then there's also significant interest among some of the Polish industrial customers as well to look at the possibility of deploying in the future the small modular reactors, which, while they would not necessarily be pumping energy into the grid, would free up power on the grid to keep costs down and to keep availability and security in the power by letting some of these large industrial customers have their own affordable, long-term, and more environmentally friendly power sources. So I think there's a lot of work ahead there, and nuclear projects do not happen quickly, but I think Poland is now on a good road, and I'm confident these projects will go forward.
Great to hear that. These are exciting times to be living in Poland and seeing these projects taking place and coming to fruition. Polish companies are already present in the American market. One of them, having its flagship store in Manhattan, in the middle of Times Square, is cosmetics company Inglot. Can other Polish firms follow its footsteps and conquer that market?
Well, I think Inglot, because of its kind of brick and mortar location, in Times Square and a few other places, is a quite visible example of that. But I think we're seeing tremendous success by Polish companies on the U.S. market, and indeed, I think sometimes U.S. consumers, U.S. businesses are not even really aware that they're Polish companies. They're looking at the best product, the best technology, and becoming customers. But if you take a firm like Live Chat, which now I believe they've rebranded as Text, being used by countless U.S. companies here. Probably a lot of Americans, and certainly even a lot of their customers don't necessarily realize that there's a company founded 20 years ago in Wrocław. But also there's a number of other Polish companies, again, that aren't household names, that provide risk management and control systems in financial services and industry. I think if you look at the gaming success of a number of the games, whether it's Witcher or Dying Light, which again, people have no idea necessarily that these are Polish creations, but are hugely popular and serve the companies that produce them very well. But there's also other emerging areas in gaming and media production. There are Polish companies that are working with the largest studios and the largest companies, and then other areas like augmented reality and virtual reality. There's companies like Immersion, which are already working with NASA and the Smithsonian and have tremendous opportunities to grow their business. And so I think that's all very exciting. But one of the things I think that's also important as well, and sometimes gets hard to pull out of all the numbers, is there's also a lot of trade directly to the U.S., but also a lot of it going through where Polish components and systems are part of European components and systems going. And that's from a statistical point of view, sometimes really hard to pull that out and understand the scope and the scale of that. But I think one of the big measures right now that's really exciting, I think for Poland and Polish companies, is that when economic transformation was beginning in the early days when I was here in the 1990s, that the idea that in the future that Poland would run a multi-billion-dollar surplus on the trade balance in services, primarily IT services, with the U.S. That was a hard thing to imagine, back in the early days when you were trying to make your phone at home or in the office actually work after a rain. So the idea that that now billions of dollars of value would be being sold to the U.S. market every year out of Poland, I think it just shows how far things have come.
Fantastic. What is your advice for Polish businessmen and businesswomen? To be present in the United States means to be in the middle of the business world. To conquer America means to conquer the world. What are the best channels to connect with American partners? How to bring America business to Poland?
Well, I think for Polish companies looking at the U.S. market, the word I usually say 3 times in a row is research, 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 and know what you want to accomplish, know what the market is there and where your competitive advantage is. But just among other channels, I think a couple of the really useful channels are, one, working on the B2B basis with U.S. companies that are already here, being onboarded as a supplier, as a partner, as a technology partner, working with them here in Poland, Central Europe, and growing that ability to reach through them into the U.S. market for their operations there is one. I think secondly, another area that shows great promise over the last few years is the U.S. Commerce Department runs an annual program each year called Select USA, taking Polish companies, along with others from the region, to Washington to meet not only with officials from the U.S. administration and the states, but also to arrange some of those introductions one-on-one to really let them talk directly to companies and explain how to do that. As you know, having spent time there, the U.S. is a big place. So unless you're really focused and know what you want to do, getting that right, having a distributor in Milwaukee might be a great step, but it's highly unlikely to get you into the whole U.S. market. So thinking about how you partner, how you develop. But I think increasingly we're also seeing some Polish companies simply move some of the manufacturing there, realizing that what they're doing in order to either meet standards or just to cut out the enormous transport costs and customs, to simply set up operations to serve existing suppliers there. And we see this in candles and windows and other building materials, some electronic equipment. So I think that Polish companies are increasingly ambitious about the North American market. And I think that that's the other key thing to think about is the fact that going into the U.S. market or the Canadian market or the Mexican market gets you access to the North American free trade area. So that it's a tremendous opportunity, but because of its size, it does require some careful calibration and thinking about what are you willing to invest and how can you do the business.
So before anybody decides to go into that market, they have to do a thorough research, as you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, well, just because you want your time and energy to be well spent and not have a poorly planned experience. In my advisory work, one of the big things I talk to companies about, regardless of where they come from and where they're doing business, is the poor preparation trap. Ambition and excitement are often not quite enough to carry the day.
That's true. That's definitely true. Let's move to military subjects. The military partnership between the United States and Poland. It started a long time ago with Kościuszko and Pułaski fighting along Americans for, as they called it, your freedom and ours. Is the current military agreement and NATO structure making this partnership even stronger than before?
Well, yes, it is. But let me segue historically to one thing I think is sometimes overlooked, and it's a nice connective tissue between the Revolutionary War era and the First World War, Second World War, on then into the post-communist times and the close U.S.-Poland military cooperation. I always like to remind people, though, that the famous mark of the 303 Squadron, the Kościuszko Squadron, is really the mark of the 7th Eskadrille of the Polish Air Force in the Bolshevik War, which was founded and led by American pilots. Hence the stars and stripes combined with the kosa, the scythes there. And so I think that there's many contact points throughout history of Poles and Americans coming together for common cause. But I think today the military and strategic cooperation is very deep. It's very solid, continues to grow. And I think the fact that right now with the current Russian aggression against Ukraine, that in response we have now around 12,000 U.S. troops in Poland, aside with about 4,000 of those being the regular Armor Brigade combat team rotation that's been underway for many years, but with Patriot batteries and air units and logistics units here, and of course now with 5 Corps Forward having their headquarters in Poznan, I think it underscores just how deep, close, and long-term that cooperation is. But I think the important thing also, to remember is that Poland and the U.S. have a fairly good common understanding of the fact that it's one thing to say that you will defend your countries, your territory, your way of life and democracy, but you need to be prepared to do it. And I think that this is something where the partnership between the U.S. and Poland, is very much aligned.
Good. And you mentioned with whatever is happening across our eastern border, that partnership, it's even more important right now. So I'm pretty sure people of Poland do feel safe having American troops present on our soil.
Well, I think that I'm regularly in and out of Rzeszów, and I think it's very often you can tell when someone in the last year or two is arriving in Rzeszów for the first time when they're looking out the window, and seeing those U.S. missile batteries deployed at the airport there, the radars active and spinning. I think it makes them realize that this is a very much a clear example of the tight cooperation, not only for the mutual defense but also to support Ukraine.
Correct. Whenever I see American troops in Poland, I always approach them, thank them for their service, and tell them how much I appreciate it. I remember from the United States, it's very common over there to approach military servicemen and women and do thank them for their service and for their sacrifice.
Yeah, I usually say hello and ask them, how they're doing and how they're enjoying their time in Poland. And I would say the vast majority,
They do.
enjoy their time here. But I think it's also important too, because whether it's over the years now, coming up on a decade with the Armor Brigade combat rotations and the various striker rides through Poland, and that it also lets the soldiers not only meet their Polish counterparts, but also lets them see that Poland is a place that becomes real to them. Comes a place that they realize this is why we're here. Mm-hmm. This is why we're here as part of NATO. This is why we're here in an allied country. It's not just a faraway imaginary land. It's a place, and I think that is important for continuing and building that very long-term cooperation.
Yeah, and I agree. On October 15th, the people of Poland finally voted to change the government and removed Peace Party from power. Luckily, compared to the United States, we do not have a political system that gives the ultimate power to the president. In the US, the president serves as a country's head of state and government. I always admire the authority and strong position of POTUS. Do you think that maybe someday Poland will represent the same democratic values as the United States and could in turn have similar, if not the same, political system?
Well, I think that by and large, while there are always a few outlying voices, I think by and large that Poland does reflect, the democratic values that are, enshrined in hopefully the practice and certainly in the governing documents of the United States. But each system has its perhaps its strengths and weaknesses between the parliamentary system and the direct, if you will, republic system and the varying roles. But I think what's important is that both systems are designed to have a certain amount of checks and balances within them. So whether it be the separation of the executive, judiciary, and legislative, and the various mechanisms there. So I think every democracy, and we see this, throughout the democratic world, the structures tend to evolve over time. Sometimes the pendulum swings one way or back the other way. Yeah. But I think that is also something that is a reminder to all of us, whether you're in business or whether you're in politics or whether it's just about civil society as a citizen, that you have to continually assess and reevaluate what is the best way forward. Mm-hmm. And very often it's a messy process with a lot of arguing, so whether it's in the boardroom or in the parliament or in the Congress, but ultimately, the world continues to change and evolve. Mm-hmm. And you have to make sure that you have a system of government that's able to meet the challenges of the day and do so in a timely fashion. So what the future will hold for exactly what the shape of the systems will be. I think the main thing to consider now, certainly in Poland, is regardless of which party someone voted for, I think everyone should be pleased with the level of voter turnout, the active participation in democracy, and it really let people say, we have a voice. Whether our party wins or doesn't win, the massive turnout showed, a strong engagement in civil society and a desire to, for people to have their voice heard, and ultimately that's where the strength of a free civil society comes from.
And I think you agree with me if I say that right now Poland has a really big project ahead of its government to unify the people, because they've been divided for years. But it's not only in Poland; it's anywhere in the world basically. When you look, the U.S. is divided as well.
No, absolutely, and I think that ultimately it's incumbent upon our political leadership, but also on civil society, to understand that no one will be happy, and no institutions and organizations will last without some change and without some ability to find common ground and compromise. Mm-hmm. And that is And some of those lessons are true, as I said, whether you're in the boardroom at the company or whether you're in the political world. Trying to have absolute authority or control without taking into account other people's views, impact that decisions have on them, can be a pretty short road.
Yeah. As an American, how do you define patriotism within these values, freedom, liberty, and independence? What does patriotism mean to you?
Well, I think that's a pretty tough question, because patriotism.
Nobody said questions will be easy.
No, but patriotism's in the eye of the beholder,
Yeah.
and shaped by your experience, shaped by your environment. But the way I look at patriotism, the way I was raised. On one side of my family, my family's been involved in every war and movement since before the American Revolution in the U.S. One side of my family's been in the U.S. since the 1750s. So they were in the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Civil War, and everyone, since then. But that's one definition of patriotism. The other side is I had members of my family that held elective office at the local level. Mm-hmm. My grandfather was a sheriff, but as an elected sheriff, and I think so. Being involved in community, being involved in society, and thinking about what's the common good, because again, like with the high level political decisions, I don't think you can be a patriot in the true sense of the word unless you're thinking about what's good for your society and for your country, not just what's good for a group of it or a part of it. Mm-hmm. So I think that strong civil society engagement and making sure that you think that just because someone doesn't agree with me doesn't make them any less patriotic.
Correct.
Than I or anyone else is. So I think that has to be a fundamental bedrock as part of how you see patriotism. And I think that, each country, it varies, a little bit. I mean, I know over the years, many of my colleagues from the time I first lived and traveled in Europe back in the 80s, they would go to the States and they say, wow, there's a lot of flags everywhere. Well, that's and some countries that are no less patriotic and wanting the best for their country and believe in it, that had less flags. It doesn't, these are just.
Americans are proud of the flag and proud of the colors, and they do display it in a certain way that it's a proper way.
Yeah.
I seen videos in Poland when the people that were present during some event. I don't recall what event was exactly. If you ask them if they're patriots, they would say, yes, we're very patriotic, right? Poland, etc. But when they took the flag out of the monument and they had to do something with the flag, they didn't know how to handle it. They just folded it and threw it away, which was unheard of when you look at the U.S.,
Well, I think there is a culture of the flag as not being just the flag; it's a symbol of the republic. Mm-hmm. Certainly in my earliest childhood days, one of the first things I learned in Cub Scouts, which we have to go into before you get to Boy Scouts, was how to fold the flag and etiquette for the flag.
It's beautiful. The ceremony of folding the flag is just.
But again. There are many people who wave flags that I don't consider to be very good patriots.
Of course.
In many countries, or stand behind certain symbols where what they propose or advocate is not what I would consider to be, true civil society patriotism. But again, everyone's entitled to their views, and the way you hopefully promote the best, most inclusive values are through discussion, through political discourse, and not saying, you're wrong and I'm right.
Yeah, of course. We are very lucky that Mr. Mark Brzezinski is the United States ambassador in Poland. I'm sure that you have a great professional relationship with him. How do you compare Mr. Brzezinski to previous ambassadors that you have met before?
Well, Ambassador Brzezinski is a great advocate for Poland in the U.S., and I think he's a great advocate for the U.S. Here in Poland, and very much committed to continuing to enhance the U.S.-Poland strategic relationship. He's a great supporter for U.S. investors. But he's also willing to, get his hands dirty. I've been out with the ambassador, invited him out on cold days to help load relief supplies on the trucks going to villages deep in Ukraine, and happy to lean in and not just put his position behind it, but to put his back into it. But I think he continues a very fortunate history that we have here in Poland of having ambassadors who are committed to the path that Poland's been on of democracy and free markets, and really seeing it as a fantastic partner for the United States. And so whether they've been political appointees or whether they've been career diplomats, I think no ambassador that I've worked with, and I think Ambassador Brzezinski is now my 9th ambassador that I've worked with here, ever felt that the relationship, was a zero-sum game. It's got to be a mutually beneficial relationship to really be a long-lasting, partnership.
Makes sense, yeah.
But I think that when you look back at, the some of the ambassadors we've had here, that worked on NATO expansion and accession, that were very supportive, to the surprise of some people, but not to I think me or business folks, but were very supportive about helping Poland with EU accession, and encouraging them, to make the right steps to take advantage of the single market, but also over the years to promote investment, to promote trade, to promote scientific exchange, and then we've seen we have the enhanced defense cooperation agreement the last few years. We have the permanent stationing of U.S. troops here, and then of course one of the projects I was really pleased to work on in the past with Ambassador Mosbacher was the visa waiver program.
Oh yeah,
which
that was a huge one.
It was a tough one to crack. We were close multiple times, but sometimes having to go back and say, look, this is purely a statistical measure.
Yeah,
it's not that people don't want Poland in. It's just that we need to get the refusal rate down. But we're able to do that, and we worked with a number of the Polish organizations. A lot of our member companies worked on that to make sure that people had visas. Even if they didn't have an immediate trip planned, but just to make sure that we had them.
Yeah.
And so that was I think important, not only because I think Poland deserved to be in the visa waiver program, but I think also the enormous amount of effort that the mission here put into that was a good example to say, look, we want this to be a much more of a partnership, and not a big brother, little brother relationship.
Correct. Yeah, coming back to Mr. Brzezinski, I had a pleasure of meeting him once. Very, very warm individual, very approachable, as much approachable as he can to be as an ambassador. But yeah.
And I think that the other thing too that has helped us over the years, while we've had fantastic professional diplomats, we've also had a number of folks such as Ambassador Brzezinski, Ambassador Mosbacher, that were also very experienced people in the private sector. So their ability to also understand, what needs to happen for the U.S. investment to come, but also the steps and the atmosphere, the environment needed to really grow innovation and provide opportunity for young people. I think we've had a very fortunate mix. So I wouldn't want to compare, because they're all as different as as somebody would say, as different as snowflakes, but all were committed to this relationship. But I think we're in a good we're in a good position now. it's also tough. You can't be the U.S. ambassador and make everybody happy.
Of course.
But I think as long as the goal remains the same, I think we'll continue to be well served. I think both now with Ambassador Brzezinski and I hope in the future.
So far, we had luck with good individuals serving that position. During your interaction with the Polish people, did you notice that they mostly predict failures, unlike Americans who have a positive attitude towards accessing the situation and are more willing to see good fortune?
I think that is a stereotype that has certainly been changing a lot over the last couple decades. I think that yes, that certainly in my early days, pre-1989 in the region and kind of early days where there was a sort of a don't blame me if it rains, hope for the best, but whatever happens, we may not be good. But I think that part of that was life experience and very difficult history, and the ability throughout various times in Polish history and indeed other places in Central Europe to not be in control of your destiny. So I think that was a kind of a natural sort of a reaction, but I think certainly what I noticed certainly over the last 20 years or so that attitude, particularly in business, particularly in science, innovation, is very, very much diminished. I think with you see from the earliest days of the return of free market here, my experience has been that the most optimistic, sometimes wildly optimistic and perhaps misguided, but nonetheless optimistic people have been business people who say yep, nobody told me I can't do this, so I'm gonna go do this. So I think that as often with stereotypes, they stay with us long after they cease to be very true. So I think we'll probably still need a little bit more time before maybe that's a more widely seen phenomena. But I think for anyone who does business here, anyone who meets with Polish policymakers, over the last 25 years or so, sees that there's very much an idea that we can do this.
So it's changing for the better.
Indeed.
Yeah. What in Poland do you like the most? What will you take with you if you ever decide to go back to America?
Well, after 30 plus years here.
Are you planning to go back to America or you stay?
I go back to America all the time.
To visit,
but to visit, no, I think, this is, Poland is home. I think what I like most, as we talked a little bit before we began our discussion, the pace of change, the openness to change, the very much a kind of a much broader kind of collective idea that to move the country and society forward, if you will. Now, whether you say it's to take advantage of opportunity now or to make up for lost time when those freedoms weren't necessarily available to people. So I think that kind of attitude of embracing change, still being mindful of tradition, being mindful of culture, but sometimes the challenges of Poland's past helped it make rapid changes. When probably some people are too young even to remember when you had a brick in your hand that was called a Centertel telephone, and it barely worked outside of a few cities, but because Poland did not have this huge investment in analog mobile phones, we moved rapidly into digital phones, which led to a lot more wireless communication. It led to the development of a lot of locally produced, web and apps. It helped Poland embrace electronic banking and mobile applications and mobile finance. So that's been part of that, really, that willingness to just really move quickly and stuff. But I think the other thing too is that Poland has been from a personal point of view, has been a remarkably great place, to raise my family. I think that you never had to wait too long on any playground on a chilly day before several friendly babchas were going to offer you advice on how to help you. But I think so I think there's a underlying kind of warmth and openness that is maybe not necessarily apparent to a first-time visitor here. If I were to ever go back to the States, I'd probably be thinking about how to get back as quickly as possible.
That's what I have.
Again, I've spent most of my adult life here in Poland or other places in Central Europe, so it is very much home for me. But I do think that the other thing, I think almost all, whether they're Americans, Canadians, Australians, Koreans, anyone you talk to, one of the things they're also struck by too is the feeling that Poland is a safe, secure place, and not just at the geopolitical, military, NATO level, but in general, on the streets, in your daily life, it's not only a safe place, but it's also a place where people are willing to help and to lend a hand. And so I think these are the things that are certainly things I reflect on about having felt very fortunate over the last 3 decades here.
And what surprised you here the most in this country? Is there something that...
Well, maybe I'd probably be able to answer that question better if you asked me like 28 years ago, and after my first.
All right, you can go back in time and say what surprised you back.
Whether I can even remember that far back in time. I think one of the things that struck me, early on, as a difference from other countries, that I kind of lived and worked in. And it might just be an observation that may not be exactly true, but it's a sense I had is that how focused and without being loud about it, the value, for instance, on education and culture and literature, kind of, whether it was willingly learned by all the young students or just beaten into them, so they could pass the matura. But the level of familiarity, with the if you will, classics, not only of Polish but European literature, the attention to math and science, in the schools, and I think overall that served Poland now tremendously well over that time. But that was one of the early things that struck me when you were in a not very developed smaller town, and realizing that someone's 15-year-old son knew a lot more math than you did. You're like, wait a minute, my algebra stopped at that point, and you're, so that was, to me, was one of the early signs that, wow, there's, tremendous, intellectual rigor applied. And I think that is something that ultimately, is benefiting Poland today.
Phenomenal. We started our conversation prior to recording, and we talked a little bit about restaurants in Warsaw and the food scene here and back in the day. Finally, what's your favorite Polish dish?
Now that is another challenging and virtually impossible question. I think it might depend on the season you ask me. In the summertime, I think it would probably definitely be, grilled karkówka and pickles.
That's not far away from American barbecue. And
no, it's not. But maybe in the dead of winter, I might be more keen to answer and say that I'll have a devolai and a żurek. But I do think that one of the things, though, that I did learn and is now kind of much more part of my automatic repertoire, is the soup element. When I first came to Poland, I noticed with my wife's family, but also, going out, just, this kind of everywhere. There was just soups everywhere. And yes, of course, I ate soups growing up, but it wasn't,
everywhere and every day, right?
Kind of, yeah, and the huge variety, of them. So I think that was, something to do. And now I'm very proud of my Russell, that, took many years, but
you mastered it.
Yeah, well, when my father-in-law, compliments my wife on the soup, but it's my soup, I feel it's like,
that feels
okay,
great,
I've done something, if nothing else, in my years here. But I think that the other interesting thing too, I think, is that you do need a little time here to see that actually there's a lot more variety and complexity to Polish cuisine than pierogi and schabowy, which are both wonderful things. Yeah. But the terms of the salads and surówka and the various things. But what I quickly saw as well too, that coming here and now, it may not be quite as apparent, particularly even to young people, here in Poland, but just how seasonal the diet was. Mizuria or something, there's certain times of the year, and Chłodnik and various things, it wasn't all things all year long, because you could go down to the big supermarket and buy, fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, everywhere all the time. Now, of course, that's all available, all the time. But it's something that we talk about at home sometimes, where, we'll have the discussion where it just doesn't seem like the right time to fix that dish. And it might be because those, fresh off the vine tomatoes from the back garden or from the targ are not available. You say, okay, so I don't want it from the szklarnia, so let's fix something else. So I think that closeness, if you will, to the seasons and the kind of seasonal food and everything like that, is certainly something that I still very much appreciate.
Perfect. Tony, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being a guest on my show. It was a pleasure, and it is a pleasure to meet you and to talk to you. I'm pretty sure our listeners will enjoy this conversation.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and all it does though occasionally is makes me feel really old. But why? Just when I think back about all the years here. But it's I'm always happy to talk about Poland, and what a wonderful place it is to not only to work but to live. And I just hope that if there's anyone that does listen to the show that is thinking about either visiting or coming back, whether for a visit or to come home and be part of this this great adventure, to do so, because it's a great place to be. So thanks for having me.
Somebody said we are as old as we feel, so...
Oh, then I'm a child.
There we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
W imieniu autora dziękuję Państwu za uwagę. Zachęcam do subskrypcji podcastu oraz jego oceny.